The broken glass bit into Declan Foster's knees as he crawled toward the wreckage, his daughter's bedroom light still glowing warm through the window 50 yards behind him. Blood spread in dark rivers beneath the overturned sedan, the metallic scent thick in the October air, mixing with gasoline fumes and the ghost of expensive perfume. Inside the twisted metal cage, a woman lay pinned. Her designer suit cream silk that probably cost more than his monthly rent was now drenched crimson from the waist down. Each breath she took came shallow and desperate. When her eyes found his through the shattered windshield, they held something beyond pain. Fear, raw and absolute. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the hiss of the damaged radiator. "It hurts." Her hand trembled as it moved toward her lower body. "Down there, too." Declan's hands froze mid-reach toward the jagged steel beam pinning her legs. 3 years ago, these same hands had made a split-second call that ended a woman's life on his table and destroyed his career as a paramedic. Now he had seconds to decide: pull back that steel and face what he'd see, or let his past kill again. Declan had been awake when the crash happened. Sleep rarely came easy anymore. Not since the hearing. Not since the day they'd stripped his paramedic license and told him his judgment couldn't be trusted. He'd been sitting at his kitchen table at 11:47 p.m., staring at the overdue electricity bill and wondering how he'd make next month's rent work. His daughter Harper slept soundly upstairs, her breathing even and peaceful through the baby monitor he still kept plugged in even though she was 7 now. Some habits died hard: the instinct to protect, the need to know she was safe. Then came the sound. Not the squealing brakes or the crunch of metal that most people would remember. What Declan heard first was the silence that followed, that awful, pregnant pause between impact and consequence. The moment when the universe held its breath and waited to see if death would follow. He was out the door before his conscious mind caught up, his body moving on muscle memory 3 years dormant but never forgotten. The sedan had left the road completely, jumping the shallow ditch that separated his rental property from the county highway. It had rolled twice, maybe 3 times, before coming to rest on its side against the oak tree that marked his property line. Steam rose from the engine block. One headlight still flickered, casting manic shadows across the torn earth. Declan's phone was in his hand. 911. He should call. That was protocol. That was what civilians did. But his fingers hesitated over the screen because he could see movement inside the vehicle, and he knew with absolute certainty that whoever was in there had minutes, not the 15 or 20 it would take for an ambulance to arrive from the county hospital. He pocketed the phone and ran. The driver's side door had crumpled inward, the window frame bent at an angle that made extraction impossible from that direction. Declan circled to the passenger side, now facing skyward, and climbed onto the exposed undercarriage. The metal was still hot from the engine. He could feel it through his shoes. The passenger door resisted at first. The frame warped from impact. But 3 years of construction work had built different muscles than his paramedic days. The door gave with a screech of tortured metal. That's when he saw her clearly for the first time. Mid-30s, he guessed. Dark hair matted with blood from a scalp wound. Her face was pale, going paler, and her lips had that bluish tint that meant shock was setting in. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They were completely aware, lucid, terrified. "My name is Declan," he said, his voice falling into that calm, measured tone that used to come so naturally in emergencies. "I'm going to help you. Can you tell me your name?" "Brielle." Her voice was stronger than he'd expected given the amount of blood. "Brielle Hartwell. I can't feel my legs. I can't." She stopped, her breath hitching. "There's something wrong. Something really wrong." Declan positioned himself half in, half out of the passenger door frame, assessing. She was pinned from the waist down by what looked like part of the center console that had sheared loose during the roll. One of the seat rails had punched through the floor pan and was wedged at an angle that trapped both her legs. But it was the piece of the door frame, a jagged strip of metal about 2 feet long and 3 inches wide, that concerned him most. It had speared through the cabin and was pressed against her lower abdomen and upper thighs. If that metal had penetrated, if it was applying pressure to her femoral artery or had damaged her pelvis, moving it could be fatal. But leaving it meant she'd bleed out internally before help arrived. He reached past her to check for other injuries, his hands gentle but efficient. Possible concussion from the head wound. Left arm broken, bone visible through the silk of her jacket. Ribs. At least 2 cracked based on the way she was breathing. But the real danger was below. The real danger was the thing she'd whispered about. Brielle, I need to see where you're hurt. The metal that's pinning you down, I need to assess if it's penetrated. Do you understand? She nodded, tears cutting clean tracks through the blood on her face. I can feel it. It's inside. I think it's... Her voice broke. Please, just get me out. Please. Declan's hands were shaking. He pressed them against the outside of the car to steady them, to hide the tremor he couldn't control. 3 years ago, the woman's name had been Patricia Reeves, 42 years old, mother of 3. She'd been coding on the table when Declan had to make a choice about which injury to address first. He'd chosen wrong. The wound he'd thought was superficial had been masking a severed artery. She'd bled out before they'd even gotten her to surgery. The board had ruled it a judgment error. Inexperience. Insufficient assessment under pressure. They'd been kind about it, almost sympathetic, but the result was the same. License revoked. Career over. Identity erased. I need to tell you something, Declan said, pulling himself back to the present. I'm not currently a licensed paramedic. I was, for 8 years. But I lost my license 3 years ago because I made a mistake. A woman died because of a call I made. Brielle's eyes widened, but she didn't look away. Are you telling me you can't help? No. The word came out harder than he intended. I'm telling you I can help. I know exactly what I need to do, but you need to know who's doing it. You need to consent, understanding that the person treating you is someone the medical board decided shouldn't be trusted with this kind of decision. She reached up with her unbroken arm and grabbed the front of his shirt, her grip surprisingly strong. I don't care about your license. I don't care about 3 years ago. Right now, you're all I have. So either help me or watch me die. Your choice. The words hit him like a physical blow. Your choice. That's what it always came down to. That's what had haunted him every night for 3 years. The choice. The terrible, impossible weight of choosing in seconds what would take someone minutes to evaluate in hindsight. Okay, he said. Okay. I'm going to call for an ambulance first, then I'm going to work on getting you out. But Brielle, I need you to stay with me. I need you to keep talking. Can you do that? She nodded. Declan pulled out his phone and dialed. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. He gave the location, the condition of the patient, the injuries he'd identified. The dispatcher tried to keep him on the line, but he cut her off. I'm trained. I've got this. Just send the bus. He hung up before she could argue and turned back to Brielle. Tell me about yourself. What were you doing out here? Driving. She managed something that might have been a laugh. Obviously. I was coming back from Chicago. Business meeting. I'm the CEO of Hartwell Industries. We manufacture medical equipment. Isn't that ironic? I make the tools that save lives and I'm dying in a ditch. You're not dying. Declan was already working, his hands moving with a certainty his mind didn't feel. He needed to stabilize her neck first, but he had nothing to work with. No collar. No backboard. Just his hands and whatever he could improvise. Keep talking. Tell me about your company. We make surgical instruments, precision tools. My father started the company 40 years ago. I took over 5 years ago when he retired. Everyone said I was too young, too inexperienced, but I proved them wrong. I built it into a $200 million operation. Her breathing was getting more labored. At least I did something right before I died. Brielle, focus. Declan leaned closer, making eye contact. You're not going to die. But I need to move this metal, and when I do, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt more than anything you've ever felt. And I need to assess the damage. Do you understand what I'm telling you? She understood. He could see it in her eyes. The metal had penetrated. When he pulled it back, he'd be looking at wounds in places that were intimate, private, vulnerable, a stranger's hands on injuries that no one should see. A man she'd known for 5 minutes making decisions about her body in its most exposed state. "Do what you have to do," she whispered. "Just don't let me die. I have too much left to fix." Declan positioned himself as carefully as he could, bracing one foot against the seat frame, hands on the metal beam. On 3. 1. 2. He pulled on 2. It was a trick he'd learned in his first year as a paramedic. No one was ever ready on 3. The surprise helped. The metal resisted, grinding against something, then came free with a sound like tearing fabric. Brielle screamed, a raw sound that cut through the night air and made Declan's chest constrict with familiar dread. But he couldn't stop, couldn't hesitate. He pulled the metal clear and tossed it aside, then immediately moved to assess. The suit pants were shredded. The metal had penetrated her upper right thigh, missing the femoral artery by what looked like less than an inch. A second penetration, this one higher, had torn through her lower abdomen. Both wounds were bleeding, but not arterial, not immediately fatal. He could work with this. Declan stripped off his shirt, using his teeth to tear it into strips. Direct pressure first, always direct pressure. He packed the wounds, his movements methodical despite the trembling in his hands. Brielle had gone silent, her body rigid with pain. "Stay with me," he said, his voice urgent. "Brielle, stay with me. What else do you make at your company? Tell me about the products." "Retractors," she gasped. "Surgical retractors, clamps, scissors, all the little pieces that hold you together while they fix you." A sob broke through. Ironic. So ironic. Not ironic. Poetic. You spent your life making tools to save people. Now those skills are going to help save you. Declan was working faster now, stripping the seatbelt from the driver's side, using it to secure the makeshift bandages. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't protocol, but it would hold until the ambulance arrived. That's when he heard it. The sound of tires on gravel, but not from the direction of town. From further up the county road, coming fast. Declan's head snapped up. A black SUV with no headlights was approaching, slowing as it neared the crash site. Something in his gut twisted. Wrong. This was wrong. "Brielle, the accident. How did it happen?" She was fading now, shock deepening, but she forced her eyes to focus on his. "The car. Someone hit me from behind, twice. Forced me off the road. I thought maybe drunk driver, but..." She stopped, her breath catching. Oh God. It wasn't an accident. The SUV stopped 50 yards up the road. 3 men got out. They didn't move like good Samaritans. They moved like people who'd come to finish a job. Declan's mind raced through scenarios, through options. His house was 50 yards away, but between him and that safety were 3 men who'd just tried to kill the woman he was trying to save. His phone. He could call again. But by the time police arrived, if they even took the call seriously, it would be over. He looked down at Brielle. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing shallow. She was stabilized enough to survive the next 10 minutes, but only if those men didn't reach them. 3 years ago, Declan had made a choice that cost a life. He'd been paralyzed by the weight of possibility, frozen by the fear of being wrong again. He'd spent 1,000 nights replaying that moment, searching for the path he should have taken. But tonight wasn't 3 years ago. Tonight he wasn't standing in a sterile emergency room with a team of doctors and a board of inquiry waiting to judge every decision. Tonight he was kneeling in broken glass next to a woman who'd told him she had too much left to fix, and 3 men were walking toward them with purpose that had nothing to do with helping. Declan reached into the wreckage and found what he was looking for. A tire iron, half-wedged beneath the seat. He pulled it free and stood, placing himself between the approaching men and the woman bleeding out behind him. His daughter's bedroom light was still visible in the distance. Harper was still sleeping, still safe, still innocent of the violence that was walking toward her father on this October night. The men were close enough now that he could see their faces. Professional, cold, not drunk drivers, Not random violence. Something else. Something connected to the woman behind him and the words she'd said. Too much left to fix. The first man spoke. His voice was casual, almost friendly. Step aside. This doesn't concern you. It does now, Declan said. The tire iron felt heavy in his hand. Foreign. He wasn't a fighter. He was a healer. Or he had been. Before. You don't understand what you're getting into. The woman in that car, she's made some very serious people very angry. We're just here to clean up loose ends. Then you'll have to go through me first. The man sighed like this was an inconvenience rather than a threat. He nodded to the other two. They spread out, flanking. Professional. Practiced. This wasn't their first time. Declan's heart was hammering. His hands were sweating on the tire iron. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to grab Harper, and disappear into the night. But Brielle was behind him, bleeding, helpless. If he ran, she died. If he fought, they both might die. But at least she'd have a chance. The first man rushed him. Declan swung the tire iron in a wide arc, catching him across the shoulder. Not enough to stop him, but enough to slow him down. The second man was on him before he could recover, driving a fist into his ribs that knocked the air from his lungs. Declan went down hard, the gravel tearing skin from his palms. The tire iron clattered away. This was it. This was how it ended. On his knees in the dirt while his daughter slept, and another woman died because he wasn't strong enough, fast enough, good enough. Then he heard Brielle scream. Not in pain this time, in fury. She'd somehow pulled herself partly out of the wreckage, her broken arm hanging useless, blood still streaming from her wounds. In her good hand, she held the jagged piece of metal that had been pinning her down. She swung it at the nearest man, the sharp edge catching him across the back of his leg. He went down, howling. The distraction was enough. Declan lunged for the tire iron, came up swinging, connected with the second man's knee. Heard something crack. The man stumbled back, cursing. The first man, the one who'd done the talking, pulled something from his jacket. Gun. Declan saw it in slow motion, saw the way the man's hand moved with practiced ease, saw the barrel come up, saw it aim not at him, but at Brielle. He didn't think. Thinking was what had gotten Patricia Reeves killed. Thinking was the paralysis that had haunted him for 3 years. He threw himself forward. No plan, no strategy, just the certainty that he would not watch another woman die while he stood frozen. The gun went off. Sound and pressure and heat all at once. Declan felt something punch through his left shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground hard enough to see stars. Through blurring vision, he saw the first man step toward Brielle, saw her raise the metal shard one more time even though she could barely hold it. Then, sound. Sirens. The ambulance. Police. The cavalry arriving exactly 4 minutes too late to prevent everything, and just in time to witness the aftermath. The 3 men ran. They piled into their SUV and disappeared into the night, leaving behind 2 bleeding people and a crash site that looked like a war zone. Declan tried to stand. Couldn't. His shoulder was screaming, and everything felt distant and cottony. He crawled toward Brielle instead, reaching her just as she collapsed back against the car. "You okay?" she asked, which was absurd considering she was the one who'd been dying 5 minutes ago. "Been better," he managed. "You?" "I hit someone with a piece of metal. I think I'm going to throw up. That's the shock. Normal. You'll be fine." "You're bleeding." "Yeah, I noticed." The ambulance pulled up, its lights painting everything in alternating red and blue. Paramedics jumped out, started the assessment, started the protocol that Declan knew by heart. He tried to tell them about Brielle's injuries, about the penetrating trauma and the blood loss, but one of them pushed him back gently. "We've got her. You need to worry about yourself right now." But he couldn't stop watching as they worked on her. Couldn't stop mentally tracking every decision they made, every choice, comparing it to what he would have done. When they lifted her onto the stretcher, she turned her head to look at him one last time. "Thank you," she mouthed. Then she was gone, loaded into the back of the ambulance with one of the paramedics, disappearing down the county road toward the hospital, while the other paramedic turned his attention to Declan. "You're lucky," the young man said as he cut away what was left of Declan's shirt to examine the gunshot wound. "Through and through. Missed everything important." "Lucky," Declan almost laughed. He'd been shot. He'd been beaten. He'd fought 3 men with a tire iron and probably sustained a concussion in the process. But Brielle Hartwell was alive. She was bleeding and broken, but alive. And that felt like something other than luck. It felt like redemption. The police took statements. Declan told them everything he could remember about the men, about the SUV, about the way they'd moved and spoken. Detective Harper, no relation to his daughter, though the name made him smile despite everything, took notes with practiced efficiency. "You saved her life," the detective said when Declan finished. "The first time and the second time. That's something. I just did what anyone would do." "No." Detective Harper looked up from his notepad. "Most people would have called 911 and waited. You didn't, and Mrs. Hartwell is alive because of it. So is your daughter, probably. Those men would have come for witnesses." The words settled over Declan like a cold blanket. Harper, his daughter. Asleep through all of this, protected by nothing but luck and 50 yards of distance. He needed to get to her, needed to see her, hold her, confirm that she was still safe and whole and untouched by the violence that had erupted in their front yard. The paramedic wanted to take him to the hospital. Declan refused. The bullet had gone clean through. The wounds were packed and dressed. He'd be fine. He just needed to get to his daughter. Detective Harper drove him the 50 yards to his house, helped him up the front steps, waited while Declan checked on Harper, found her still sleeping, still innocent, still perfect. When he came back down, his good arm wrapped protectively around his injured shoulder, the detective was waiting with a card. "Call me if you remember anything else, or if those men come back. We're going to have a patrol car outside your house for the next few days, just in case. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're a hero, Mr. Foster, whether you believe it or not." The detective left. Declan stood in his kitchen, looking out at the wreckage still visible in the pre-dawn darkness. The overturned sedan, the churned earth, the blood-stained gravel. In a few hours, a tow truck would come and haul away the physical evidence. But the rest of it, the choice he'd made, the life he'd saved, the violence he'd participated in that would stay. He thought about Patricia Reeves, about the mistake that had cost her life and his career, about the 3 years he'd spent believing that one failure defined him more than 8 years of successes, about the paralysis that had gripped him every time he'd been faced with a decision that mattered. Tonight he'd faced that paralysis again, and he'd moved anyway, not because he was certain, not because he knew he'd make the right choice, but because standing still, letting fear win, that was a choice too, and it was the one he refused to make anymore. Upstairs, Harper stirred. He heard her through the monitor, heard the soft sounds of her waking. She'd have questions about the police car outside, about why her father was injured, about the crash she might have slept through or might have heard in her dreams. He'd tell her the truth. Age-appropriate, edited, but true. He'd tell her that sometimes people needed help, and you helped them even when it was hard, even when it was scary, even when you weren't sure you'd make the right choice. You tried anyway, because trying was the only thing that mattered in the end. Declan climbed the stairs one-handed, his shoulder throbbing in time with his heartbeat. Harper was sitting up in bed when he reached her door, rubbing her eyes, her hair a wild tangle around her face. When she saw him, saw the bandages and the blood still visible on his jeans, her eyes went wide. "Daddy? What happened?" He sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder. "There was an accident. A woman got hurt. I helped her. Are you okay?" "I will be. Just got a little banged up in the process." She reached out and touched the edge of the bandage with one small finger, gentle and curious. "Does it hurt?" "Yeah, but it's worth it. She's going to be okay because of what we did." "We?" "Yeah, you too. You kept sleeping, kept being safe. That made it easier for me to focus on helping her. So we did it together. Harper considered this with the seriousness that 7-year-olds brought to important matters. Then she nodded, satisfied with the explanation. Can I see her? The lady you helped? Maybe. When she's feeling better. Would you like that? Yeah. I want to meet someone brave enough to make my daddy bleed. Declan laughed, despite himself, despite the pain, despite everything. She is pretty brave. You'd like her. He stayed with Harper until she fell back asleep, his good hand resting on her back, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. When he was certain she was deep under, he made his way back downstairs. The pain in his shoulder had settled into a deep, persistent ache. He'd need to see a doctor eventually, get proper treatment, maybe some antibiotics to ward off infection, but for now, he just needed to sit, to process, to let the adrenaline drain away and leave behind whatever came next. The sun was starting to rise when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up on the fourth ring. Mr. Foster? A woman's voice. Familiar somehow. This is Brielle Hartwell. Brielle, how are you calling me? You should be in surgery. I am. Or I was. Or I'm about to be. I'm honestly not sure. They gave me something for the pain and everything's a bit fuzzy. But I found your number in the police report and I needed to call before they take me under. I needed to say something. You don't need to say anything. Just focus on getting better. No, I do. You saved my life, twice. And I need you to know that I understand what that cost you. What it might still cost you. Declan's hand tightened on the phone. What do you mean? You told me you lost your license. That you're not supposed to be making those kinds of medical decisions anymore. And I want you to know that whatever happens, whatever they try to say about tonight, I'm going to fight for you. You gave me my life back. I'm going to give you yours. The words hit harder than the bullet had. Declan found himself blinking back something that might have been tears, might have been exhaustion, might have been 3 years of grief finally breaking loose. You don't owe me anything, he managed. I owe you everything, and I pay my debts. So get some rest, Mr. Foster. You're going to need it, because I'm about to turn your life upside down in the best possible way. She hung up before he could respond. Declan sat staring at his phone, at the unknown number displayed on the screen, at the promise it represented. He didn't know what she meant, didn't know what she planned to do. But something in her voice, that same strength that had made her grab a piece of metal and fight back when most people would have given up, told him that whatever Brielle Hartwell set her mind to, it happened. The patrol car, outside, changed shifts. Declan watched through the window as one officer briefed another, pointing toward the house, toward the crash site, establishing the perimeter that would protect them for the next few days. Until they caught the men, or until they decided the danger had passed. He thought about those men, about the cold professionalism in their movements, about the way the first one had spoken, casual and certain, like killing was just another item on a to-do list. They'd come for Brielle because she had something they wanted, something worth killing for, and now they knew there was a witness, a man who'd seen their faces, heard their voices, could identify them to police. They'd be back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, someone would have to finish what they'd started. Declan should have been afraid. Part of him was. But a larger part, the part that had stood between those men and Brielle with nothing but a tire iron and determination, that part felt something else. Purpose. Direction. The first clear sense of who he was supposed to be in 3 years. He'd spent those years in limbo, working construction jobs that paid the bills but meant nothing, existing in the space between the person he'd been and whoever he was supposed to become. But tonight had stripped away that limbo. Tonight had shown him that the person he'd been, the paramedic, the healer, the man who ran toward trouble instead of away from it, that person was still there, buried under grief and self-doubt. But there, upstairs, Harper slept on, innocent and safe. Somewhere across town, Brielle was in surgery, her life hanging in the balance one more time, and Declan sat in his kitchen, injured and exhausted, and somehow more whole than he'd felt in 3 years. When the sun finally cleared the horizon, painting his kitchen in shades of gold and amber, he made himself a promise. Whatever came next, however this played out, he wouldn't freeze again, wouldn't let fear paralyze him into inaction. He'd made mistakes. He'd make more. But he'd face them moving forward, not standing still. Patricia Reeves would always be part of his story. The woman he couldn't save. The choice that haunted him. But maybe, just maybe, Brielle Hartwell could be part of his story too. The woman he did save. The choice that mattered. He picked up his phone and pulled up the hospital's number. Time to check on a patient. Time to start being who he was supposed to be again. The voice on the other end of the line was professional, efficient. County General, how may I direct your call? I need an update on a patient. Brielle Hartwell. She came in earlier this morning from a car accident. Are you family? Declan hesitated. Then, I'm the person who saved her life. Does that count? There was a pause, then a sound that might have been a smile. Hold, please. I'll transfer you to the surgical wing, he held, and while he waited, he watched the sun rise higher, burning away the last of the night's darkness, promising something he hadn't allowed himself to hope for in 3 years, a second chance. Not to erase the past, but to build something better from what remained.